Hi everyone, it's good to see you again. I'm Mr. Marcelo, film teacher for Creative Action, and for today's episode of Movie Memories, we are going to talk to a student who's been with us for a very long time, Adele Rankin. Adele has been an actor, a writer, a director. She's been in our summer camp. She's been in our film studio. She's been at YCC. She's just a really awesome young person and a great creative presence. Adele's first film that she ever made with Creative Action was called Bakeoff. And Bakeoff still to this day is one of the happiest memories I have as an instructor. It's a summer camp film about two young bakers who own food trailers and they compete against each other in a rivalry. After doing Bakeoff, Adele was unstoppable in our program, and then in YCC Youth Cinema Collective, our teen program, in her freshman year, not knowing really anybody in the room, she pitched and won the opportunity to direct a film called Calavera in Super 8mm film, which was a really fun experience for her as a freshman. And now Adele is one of the peer leaders in our Youth Cinema Collective. And so we're going to talk to her about making Bakeoff, about her time as a writer and actor and director in Creative Action, and how she's changed over the years and what she's learned. So go to the links below and look at Bakeoff and Calavera, and then come back and listen to us talk for a little while. We're going to be talking with Adele Rankin in a little bit. See you soon. All right, we're here with Adele Rankin, longtime Creative Action participant. I guess 8 years or so, for 8 years now. You were 9 when you first came to us. Yeah. You were 9 when you first came to us in summer camp doing Bakeoff. Now, you mentioned that that was your first summer camp with us, but what was your artistic stuff that you were into prior to that? Like, how much of an artist were you before you came to us?
Well, I guess I got into writing in second grade, so I was writing really bad short stories with some very interesting illustrations. And I was really into Shakespeare, not acting, just Shakespeare. I did Hamlet's To Be or Not to Be for a school talent show, so normal kind of things you'd expect from a second grader. But
I remember
that
you
was
being really into Shakespeare. I remember that.
I'm still pretty into Shakespeare. I just do less of it because I do less acting.
Yeah, so you were in this movie. So we did this movie Bake Off, and so tell me a little bit about what you remember from the process as a kid, because I have a completely different memory of what went down. So you tell me what you remember.
Yeah, let's see. Well, I remember in the devising process, there was this other girl, Anna, who I was I thought she was really cool. So I wanted to do everything she wanted to do. So she wanted to be the cool punk baker, and I wanted to be the cool punk baker's assistant or something. And I ended up as the more princessy, girly baker or whatever, which I was like, oh man,
But I
I
think,
don't get to hang out as much.
but well, first of all, I think what was really interesting about the Princess Baker role in that is that the Princess Baker, I think, has a little bit more room to be wild and crazy later because of the setup of who this person is, and their world crumbles around them as the movie continues. So I think there's a little bit more room there. What I remember is that you were um while you weren't while we all kind of understood this character wasn't really you, it was very much you were such a good attitude. You had such a good attitude about the whole thing. I remember you were just so sweet making the thing and being very cool with oh, I'll do this, we'll do this, and we'll have some fun, and we'll throw this around and try these things out. You had all these really great ideas. Was that your first time doing anything involving film?
Yeah, that was my first experience with film. Um,
What did you think about it? What do you remember from that you took away?
I definitely remember it was a lot. I remember a lot of things about the acting because I was doing acting back then. I remember that I was like, oh wow, I have to do a lot. I have to kind of tone it down for this because film's definitely more toned down than theater in the acting department sometimes. I remember that the camera was really big and heavy and there was lots of expensive parts and I did not want to touch it because I was afraid of that. And I remember the night before we did the first shoot, I was going all around my house and gathering things that I thought could be good And I'm sorry if this is shaking. My cat keeps like
Cats are always welcome
trying to
in our
join the
broadcasts.
interview.
Cats are
Yes.
always welcome in our broadcasts. I have my door closed, otherwise there'd probably be 2 of them in here right now.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of cool memories I remember from Bakeoff that I thought were really fun. The first is that we had this, like, we were really excited about getting to do throw up for the first time in a creative action movie. And so we had this like food coloring applesauce that people got to like just spit out, and that was pretty fun. And I also remember the now iconic like fight scene between you and Anna. So talk to me a little about your memories of that, and then I'll share mine and we can compare notes.
So, what I remember about the fight scene was that I was expecting it to be a lot more choreographed, and I don't really feel like it was choreographed. I felt like I was in a real fight, and I was like, wait a moment, I can't do this. I weigh like 12 pounds, and this is not going to go well for me.
There was a really, it was interesting because like the one thing that really worked was the jump, because you just run and you just kind of threw yourself onto Anna, and that was just like that's like everything else in the fight, whatever, that jump is amazing. And so what I think is really what I really like about it is that idea of like the jump is like everything else, the struggle and all that stuff. I was just trying to get some B-roll that I could intercut with everything. I was at like the cupcakes and all that. But I remember that I was like, we had been rolling around the wood chips for about 30 minutes or so, and there was a moment where you're like, you just kind of broke down and you're like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And like you're like, I'll do one more. And I was like, okay, thank you, Adele. And so we did one more. We finished the movie, and then at the screening, after it was all done, you wouldn't stop talking about how much you loved the fight scene.
I still think it's a very cool fight scene, and this is from someone who's like, fight scenes are my weak point in everything, in every medium.
What I like about it, I think it completes the character's kind of slow burn, that this is a person who's very put together. It's the pretty princess bake shop. They have a sense of like what good baking is and what it should be like. And then as all that gets stripped away and they get their bake shop closed and they go through all that like inner rage just comes out. And I think that's that's actually kind of a very Adele-ish kind of sensibility, right? That you're like a very nice person, but there's also this like undercurrent of smarts and urgency that I think is really interesting. So what's interesting to me is that for you was, you didn't really act that much after that. You made a few random appearances and things, but you really took to the idea of directing and creating. Can you talk a little bit about like that transition for you?
I remember I used to always want to act more, and for like, because it was a summer camp where people kept coming back, they'd cycle through the actors. And I remember one year I was like, we were doing 2 films, like one earlier on, like one the first week and one the second week. And I said, the first week I'm going to act. If the second week I'll direct. And no one thought I was actually going to stay with that because I was so into acting. And I said, no, I'm still going to direct. They gave me a little monitor to look at, and I got to sit in a chair and yell at people. And I was like, wait a minute, this is more fun. And so I didn't go back. I just kept directing.
And so now that once you got it over the idea that it's like now that you've had some time to really hone your craft a little bit, what has directing really become for you in terms of like creativity? Like, instead of just like yelling at people, which is what it would appeal to like a kid, like now as you've grown up with it, like what have you really found appealing about it?
I've always been like a super imaginative person, I guess. But like the problem with that is when you're imagining a scene, you only get to see it in your head and no one else gets to see it and like be part of that. But when you're directing, you're able to like translate it into the real world. So everyone's going to be able to like see it and see your vision and be like, oh, that's what she was talking about. And I like being able to translate my vision.
And then, so you took that later. You then directed a movie called Scouts, which was when you were in middle school, and that was kind of this kind of all-star movie. Like we somehow ended up with like all these like brilliant creative action like legend actors. kid actors, and then you directed, and it was a movie about a kid getting over the loss of their dog. And can we talk a little about like what because that was kind of like in the summer camps, it's kind of work for hire because you don't come up with the idea, the group does, and then you're like tasked to direct this thing. And so sometimes what the idea is not really in line with like what exactly you want to do, but you really took that movie and ran with it. Can you talk a little bit about like your experience making that one?
I mean, see, the thing is, like, that movie had a great script and like great actors, so I was really like able to get in there and like work with it. But also, it was personal to me because it was about a girl losing a pet, and I had lost a cat that I'd had since birth, a few like months before that, and so it was very like kind of cathartic. I use that. I pronounce that word wrong.
I think that's
every
correct.
time.
Cathartic.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's one of those weird words. But
how did it feel to create something personal? Because that's rare in a summer camp to be able, like most of them we're having a good time and we're learning, but we're not necessarily creating something like autobiographically personal and vulnerable. How did that feel for you?
I mean, it was a different experience because I definitely think like out of all the summer camp stuff I did, Scouts is my favorite. Just because it was personal and I was like able to like understand it and like work with it and understand the characters and like kind of their motivations and headspaces.
It was a really, and you and I, we've talked about this before, but like I had also just lost a cat like 2 weeks before that camp. So when we realized that we had this thing in common that we were both dealing with at the exact same time, like it became very obvious, like this is the movie we need to be making together. And luckily the rest of the crew was on board with it. And I think it was so like that movie, that theater screening, because we screened it in the Alamo, I remember that screening for me is one of the highlights of my career as a teacher, as a filmmaker, because it just felt so like we're just putting ourselves on the screen, and warts and all, and it felt very vulnerable but very empowering at the same time. I never thought that like a kid like summer camp teaching would be able to do that. I thought it would be like, all right, we're gonna have fun and activate, but like I never thought like we'd be able to do something that personal and that amazing, like successful. And it was great just working with all those great actors. Weren't they wonderful?
Oh yeah, no, amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
what's something that you're particularly proud of in that movie, like a scene or a moment?
So there's a moment where like two of the girls are talking in a tent, and it's like the main character and this girl who's kind of been like the awful one the whole film, like the classic like mean girl, kind of not your friend. But they're talking, and they're talking about like she's talking about losing her dog, and the other girl mentions losing a pet too. And I felt like getting to direct that scene. It's like because it's about the shared experiences, and shared experiences are just like so important to us as a society because it's what like binds us together. And I felt like I like directing that scene. I felt like, okay, this is what it's about. This is what making art's about.
The other thing I love about that scene is that for most of these movies, when there's a kid director and I'm the teacher, I'm usually behind you, or we're both sort of side by side, and it's very much a conversation the two of us are having about directing. But that scene, because we did it in a tent, we put the tent up indoors and we lit the tent from the inside, and it was you, the camera, and the actors in the tent, and the rest of us were just outside waiting for you to finish. And I remember I had headphones on to hear the audio, or I could hear it through the tent or something, but I had no like visual of it, and I had no communication inside the tent at all. I remember like you were just in there running that scene, and it was awesome, and we were just getting this wonderful stuff, and I was really really proud of all you guys that day, just because that's like that. Without that scene, that movie doesn't exist. The emotional crux is not there. So the fact that you were able to create this wonderfully emotional moment with two very different actors in terms of their style, right? both talented, but Bella and Skylar, very different actors. I thought was a real testament to like your growth and your ability as an artist to like channel this thing the way you wanted it. So you decided after Scouts, as you got older, that you were going to do YCC Youth Cinema Collective. So what were some of the things that, how had your art changed? How had your practice changed to the point where, like, when you came into YCC, like, what did you want to get out of that experience, having been through all these creative actions?
Honestly, originally when I came into YCC, I was mostly like, I was just like, I want to keep making films with these people because like this has been a good experience. And I have always gone to like weird little private schools that don't have their own film programs, so I needed somewhere else to go do that. So coming into YCC, I just wanted to keep making art. I just wanted to direct more stuff and make more films. But like I feel like and I've lost my train of thought.
Well, at the beginning, I remember it took you a while to get sort of comfortable with the group. Like you were like the freshman and you were quiet and you were just kind of listening. Like, can you talk a little about that time when you were just kind of in observation mode for a little bit?
Yeah, I was not like in a great place freshman year, really. Just like kind of me as a person, just because, you know, freshman year, you're starting high school and you're changing so much. So I was always more like, I'll just stay on the sidelines. I'll just, please.
It's all good. All animals welcome.
He is not welcome. He is
Oh,
always
no.
barking during my classes, and it is bad. No. So I just wanted to stay more on the sidelines and like out of everyone's way, and I just go with the group.
That's a very common reality. That's a very common way that a lot of people begin these kinds of things, because you were the youngest person in the group at the time. I remember, like everyone like of the freshmen, you were the youngest one, and so
Yeah.
you had this kind of like our kid Adele kind of deal. But you pitched a movie in the fall, like a gothic horror film in the fall called Calavera, and we granted the pitch, and you got to direct as a freshman a Super 8 film, and that was your first time working with Super 8. So talk a little about that process as a director in high school at YCC, and like what making Calavera was like for you.
Well, it was super weird because I had like a crew of like a bunch of experienced like YCC members, and I felt like really weird bossing them around because I was like tiny freshman, and I was like, "Are you guys okay with me being in charge? Because like I'm in charge, but are you okay with that?" And so I definitely, and it was even like I remember you suggested that I put it on Super 8, and I hadn't even been thinking about that, but I was like, oh yeah, no, that sounds cool. I'll just go with that because I just went with everything. But I thought like the experience of getting to film on Super 8 was just so like amazing because it's such a different medium than you're used to, and but it's still like it's film. It's like the original essence of what film was. And
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to film. It's a great learning tool, and it's surprisingly accessible if you know how to work it, and you can learn a lot from it. Um, I'm curious, how did you overcome that challenge of feeling like you were too young to boss these people around or to give direction? Like, how did you overcome that kind of, I guess, imposter syndrome a little bit?
well, I guess I didn't really overcome it until I got to set because then I just started kind of getting in the flow and I was like, okay, I know what I need to do. I know what I need now. Like, because I'm here and I've got to get it together and make the movie because that's kind of how I always feel on set is just like, it doesn't matter like where you're starting from. It just matters that you finish with the movie and you make the movie you've been wanting to make.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, and now you're a junior. You're about to finish your junior year. You have one more year, and you're a peer leader at YCC at Youth Cinema Collective. What do you see as your role as being a peer leader at Creative Action? Like, what is your what do you do as like what's important to you about that position?
I think what's important to me about the peer leader position is just like I like it's so great to like all the people are so amazing and I want to like help them. I want to take care of them. And so like but also because I was like a little freshman who was over to the side being like, oh, I don't know if I should input anything. I want to help people like understand that their voices need to be heard and that everyone's voice should be heard and that they have a spot at the table and that's their spot and they get to stay there.
You've been a real leader in terms of social justice work that we do at YCC, and your understanding of social justice has always been very, very strong. I'm curious about how you feel where your art intersects with that. Like, why is art important in terms of social justice and changing the world?
Representation matters. People need to be able to see people like them in media. And I think as a writer and a filmmaker that the most important thing I can do is write diverse characters and show people that they belong in these stories and that they can be like vampire slayers or pirates or wizards or princesses or royalty of any kind and that like everyone has a place and that it can be whatever you want it to be.
So a couple of questions and then we can be done. So what are you doing now? Like what's the kind of cool art that you're doing these days?
I mean, I'm very much into writing. I do a lot of I want to be an author. So I write lots of short stories. I've been working on a few like novel ideas that haven't gotten super far on because it's so hard to buckle down. And I write scripts too. I love screenwriting. I wrote a pilot script for a TV show that I'm still working on editing, but hopefully at some point may actually film. And it's an idea I've been working on with a friend for many years. So I was like when I finally finished it, I was just so excited about that because I've been awful at like finishing writing anything for
it's very
such
hard.
a long time. And like finishing writing something and getting into the editing stage is just so fulfilling. Like you're like, wait a moment, this is a thing. This is a thing that exists. And like now other people can look at it and not just me explaining it to them very poorly and they're confused.
Yeah, I think one of the things I like about you a lot is that like you always seem like you've got like 2 or 3 things going at the same time, like in terms of your creativity. You're never like nothing. You're never like I'm just doing whatever. You're always trying to do something whether it's with YCC or Creative Action or on your own. Is that kind of like not like prolific, like always create kind of, is that something that's important to you?
Yeah, I don't know. I have always loved coming up with stories and I feel like if I don't come up with stories, like I don't that's not me. I got to keep telling stories and coming up with new ideas and new things to say and that's what's important to me.
Cool. Well, my last question is, I mean, thinking back to like your 9-year-old self or maybe another creative action student who's 9 years old or 10 years old who's going through film stuff and like sort of where you were, like what's the advice that you would give to a young creative kid like that was like you back then? Like what would you say now looking on the other side of it to help them?
I mean, I'd say that just like keep making stuff because it matters. Like your voice matters and your opinion matters and you keep creating and you keep getting better because like that's what you deserve. Everyone deserves to be able to make things they want to see in the world. And everyone deserves to be able to create their own ideas and stories and art because that's it's just something that's so personal and special and that everyone should have.
Thank you. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Adele, for coming and talking to us. I'm actually going to give you one more question. If you could just sort of maybe take a moment and think about your creative action career a little bit and think about like, what is it? What do you think? What are the things that you learned the most in creative action that have helped you like the most? Like, reflecting back a little bit?
Let's see. I feel like the biggest thing I've learned is that you should always, like, even if you're not sure about something, just go for it and try it, because you never know what's going to happen, and that you should just take all the paths that are available.
Cool. Yeah, that's good word. A lot of people sometimes we're a little too scared to like take that plunge, but you've never been, ever since you jumped on Anna's back, you've been completely fearless, and it makes a difference. Well, thank you so much, Adele. I hope you're doing well. Give my best to your family, and hopefully we'll see each other sooner rather than later.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Nice talking to you.